to Feminism Today, everyone. I'm Sophia Johnson in New York. Karen Washington is a farmer and community activist striving to make New York City a better place to live and eat. As a community gardener and board member of the New York Botanical Gardens, she works with Bronx neighborhoods to turn empty lots into community gardens. As an advocate and former president of the New York City Community Garden Coalition, she stood up and spoke out for garden protection and preservation. As a member of La Familia Verde Garden Coalition, she helped launch a city farms market, bringing fresh vegetables to the community. She joins us to talk about the fight for food justice. Karen Washington, welcome to Feminism Today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Is urban farming the answer to food insecurity in the United States?
No, it's not. Urban farming is not the answer for food insecurity today. We just have to look at the broader sense of the food system as a whole. And the food system is two-tier. Its food system is for the haves and the have-nots. And so we have to dismantle the food system so that it's more equitable and just for all.
Mhm. Let's talk a little bit about sort of the other layer of this climate change, right? Uh, According to the World Economic Forum's 100 million farmers are really transitioning towards net zero, nature positive food systems around the world. Is this right on time, a little too late, or you're not surprised?
I'm not surprised, first of all, and it's never too late. It's never too late for a lot of us to go back to our so-called roots. A lot of people are now interested in regenerative agriculture, indigenous agriculture, going back to where things used to be, especially in the midst of climate change. We know that the big corporation of agriculture has not worked. The chemical use of agriculture has not worked. And so Mother Nature and the environment is telling us that we have to be more intentional on how we grow our fruits and our vegetables, how
Mhm.
we care for the soil, how we care for nature, how for so long agriculture has been extractive and exploitative. And now is the time to regenerate and to give back to the soil and give back to nature and grow in a way that we are working with nature instead of against nature.
Mhm. Is farming a predominantly male career path? Where are the women in urban farming or farming in general?
So if you look at here in the United States, farming now has been white, male dominant for several decades. But if you look at agriculture globally, it's women who are at the forefront when it comes to agriculture. But here in the United States, women farmers, black farmers, farmers of color are limited in the amount of access they have to land, resources. And right now, if you look at farming as a career, it's predominantly a white male profession.
Hmm. Now let's talk a little bit about that because I know the big thing as well. You mentioned it from the outset, the haves and the have-nots, and I wonder if this is sort of leaning into this debate on who can access organic foods versus those who can't access and pay for whole organic foods. Can you talk a little bit about uh, sort of the ownership? Who owns what? Who owns what part of the business? As you were sort of alluding to a moment ago.
Well, I'm here in New York State, and out of 57,000 farmers in New York State, only 139 are Black. If you look across the country, the wealth inequality that we have, whereby white households make at least 11% more in terms of income than uh, families of color. If you look at the amount of land in here in the United States, Black farmers and farmers of color
Mhm,
own only less than 1% of
mhm,
farmland in this country. So when we talk about diversity and equity, we have a long way to go to change the system. What I am proud of as being both an urban and a rural farmer is the fact that there's so many people of color that want to farm. I'm
mm.
68 years of age, and I grew
Wow.
up in a time where farming was had a negative connotation towards it.
Yeah.
People of color view farming as slave work, but again,
Mm.
the myth that has been the myth and the incorrect story that has been told time and time again, in history books, about our dedication and our part in agriculture, we were brought here enslaved because not because of our strength, but because of our knowledge of agriculture. A lot of the
Mhm.
crops that we now grow, the methods of that we use, the implements that we use, the techniques that we use came from indigenous enslaved people. And so once you get the history, the historical content correct, now you have young people of color that want to farm because they understand that relationship to farm, to history, to culture.
Mhm.
And so that's very important. And I'm very, very happy to see that.
Let's talk a little bit about the Black Farmers Fund. In New York State, the group has started to put the power back into the hands of Black farmers. How do we build social capital and community wealth? Is this the way forward?
Definitely. I think for so long we have been on the outside looking in. But if you look at the amount of power that we have collectively when it comes to wealth building, when it comes
Mhm.
to economic um, wealth, together, together as a people, we can pull our money and we can do great things. And so, what we're trying to do is to change the narrative of food and food systems and wealth building when it comes to communities of color. For so long, people come into our community and they don't talk about credit. They don't talk about investment. They don't talk about entrepreneurship. They don't talk about ownership. They'll come into our communities and talk about, yeah, you know what? Here's a food pantry. Here's a soup kitchen. Let's sign you up for SNAP.
Mhm.
And we have to break that chain of dependency and
Mhm.
start looking at ourselves in terms of prosperity and abundance and
Mhm.
power. For so long, words have been used in our community has been deficits and problems, and that has to change, and that is changing. That is changing.
Let's talk a little bit about federal funding. I know during the Trump administration there was a lot of, concern about the just the amount of funds that were going to farmers, but also just the lack of funding to Black farmers. How much funding do Black farmers get versus white farmers in this country?
Zero, zilch, what? People don't understand. People have this tendency to play the race card, to play the race card, and I
Mhm.
rather play the economic card
Yeah.
because people will come back and say, well, you're giving it to a certain amount of people, and that's reverse discrimination.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
in fact, this is how I look at it. You have a group of farmers, right?
mhm,
And one section of your farmers don't have access to land, don't have access to resources. So you want to build that group of farmers up so that they can have the same opportunity as other farmers. And if you look at it in terms of economic sense, it makes sense. And I think from time and time again, we have this elitist attitude that if we give to the poor, that we're giving something to the poor. When we give to the poor, that we're taking something away from ourselves.
mhm.
When in fact, if you give to people who are struggling to help build them up, you too are built up. And I think we have to get out of that concept of always of afraid of deficit. That we're going to help someone who's poor. That means you're taking away from us, and we're not going to have. When in fact, if you give to the people who are on the lower rung and have them move up, in essence, you move up too.
Yeah, yeah.
If you give people the opportunity to have resources, to have money, to have a house, to do things, and in fact, it makes your community better. It makes your businesses better. And so
Mhm,
we have to get out of that mindset of a deficit, of harm, and in a mindset of abundance and wealth,
mhm,
because
mhm.
across the board, we all benefit.
Yeah, that's true. Let's talk about your collaboration with Bioneers. We have a clip of your recent talk, 911, Our Food System is Not Working. Take a listen.
Why would I want to go back to land when there was a stain of slavery and a lot of my people left the land to get away from Jim Crow? And so, thinking about my relationship to land, I was truly lost. However, things started to change for me because all of a sudden I got part of the American dream. I had a house and I had a part of the American dream. I didn't have a picket fence. But across the street was this empty lot. Empty lots were prolific throughout New York City. At one time, 15,000 vacant lots, mostly in low-income neighborhoods and neighborhoods of color. And people who left, they call it white flight because they had power and privilege, and they left. They left behind the devastation of a community that was trying to build itself. I had the American dream, and quickly it became my American nightmare until people, community people, got together to change those empty lots into what we call community garden and urban farms. People who were, you can clap, people who were never given resources. Even till this day, parcels of land, people coming together with no resources, coming together to change their community, to bring hope, to provide a safety net. But back then, folks, it wasn't about food. It was about preservation. It was about dealing with a political system that didn't care. But yet, the strength and resilience of people coming together to beautify their community is important and is so important. But for me, as I started to go into my community garden, the emphasis started to change because I started to look at the food system differently. A close-up analysis of the food system and realized I was hearing a lot of social impact, social issues, so that I just couldn't concentrate on food alone because I was listening to people talking about their health issues, having type 2 diabetes and hypertension, and even their children having adult onset of diabetes. And I started hearing people talk about the environment where they were living near soil that was full of lead and they couldn't breathe because they were all of a sudden had increase in asthma. And then people who were being pushed off their land and of their apartments because there was nothing in terms of affordable housing. And then economics, people out of work trying to build an economy that wasn't for them. And yet, this is what the food system was supposed to be.
Now, that was a clip from your recent talk at the Bioneers Conference earlier this year. Why is the food system not working?
It's not working because, again, people have been telling time and time again that the food system is broken and it needs to be fixed. And I used to believe that. I was drinking that Kool-Aid. And I realized, wait a second, the food system is doing exactly what it's supposed to. It's a caste system based on those who have and have not. So in order for the food system to fix itself, it's not in terms of that it's broken, it needs to be fixed. It needs to change. And that change needs to be a shifting of power. And what I mean by a shifting of power is that for so long, there have been outsiders that have power over a lot of us.
Yeah.
That power now has to be shifted back into the hands of the community. And the community itself, the broad base of community people, need to understand the power collectively needs to happen so that we can make change. And that's how we're going to change the food system.
You coined the term and just alluded to it a moment ago, food apartheid, a caste system. What do you mean by that?
I use that term because somebody was telling me that I lived in a food desert. And I was saying, desert? I said, wait a second. We got food. We got the junk food. We have the processed food. We have the fast food. Well, we don't have healthy food options. So then they went from food desert to food swamp to food mirage. Come on, folks. Really? So let's talk about the food system as a whole. Let's peel it down layer by layer to see exactly what the food system is all about. How is it that we are taught and people tell us that, that we have to eat healthy. People in marginalized community have high incidence of type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and so they have to eat healthy. Yet, folks, healthy food is expensive. Like, why is that? They ask us to eat healthy when healthy food is expensive. Or, you want us to be more productive in the food system. Well, you know what? You got to open those doors so that people can have businesses so
Yeah.
that they can feed their family. So I coined the term food apartheid because I wanted people to like, oh, wait a second, what are we talking about? I wanted people to understand that the food system is based on the color of your skin,
Yeah.
where you live, and how much money you have. And
Hmm.
we need to sit down and have those hard conversations instead of shying away from those hard conversations of the food system. Food is a right. It is a human right. Fresh food and clean water and a decent place to live are human rights.
Yeah.
And when we talk about human rights, we're talking about rights for everybody. And when there is a population of people that don't have those rights, we have
Hmm.
to fight for that. We have to fight for that.
Hmm. Another thing that I'm sort of curious about in the subject of farming and urban farming in particular, I wonder how, because we have a lot of foreign farmers. And so I see what you're doing in terms of advocating for people of color to get on the farm and sort of understand their role and the business opportunities, really. But I wonder, why do you think farming is not appealing to this generation?
Because farming is labor intensive. It is
Hmm.
hard work, and you have to love it because you're not going to be a millionaire farming. There's
Hmm.
no two ways about it. Especially if you're a small farm, if
Yeah.
you're a small farmer and trying to get into the business of making money,
Yeah.
that's not going to happen. You're in this business because you want to grow food. You want to grow food so that you can feed people. However,
Hmm.
our farm here at Rising Root Farm, we are a pro profit farm. We are not a nonprofit farm, and I say that because we have to put into people's minds and the concept that our food is not free. There's a
Yeah.
cost and value of food that we grow, and
Yeah.
I think in the midst of marginalized community where you're surrounded by a charity-based subsidized food system of food
Yeah.
pantries and soup kitchens, and don't get me wrong, they do a heck of a job.
Yeah.
However, they're not the grocery store. That's
Yeah.
not how we're supposed to live. We live in the greatest country in the world, and we should say to ourselves, why do we have hunger and poverty? Why
Mm.
does this exist?
Hmm.
Why are these food pantries and soup kitchens existed years and years and decades? We should be running them out of business.
Yeah.
And so for me, is having those hard conversations to look at the food system in such a way to make sure that there's an opportunity for all of us to have healthy food, to eat healthy food, clean water, a place to live. And we have to continue to have those hard conversations. And as long as I have breath in my body, I'm going to
Mm.
continue to attack the food system. I'm going to continue to make sure that there's justice for all people to have that right to eat healthy food.
In 2012, you were named one of the most influential African Americans by Ebony Magazine. And 2 years prior to that, in 2010, former First Lady Michelle Obama presented you with a National Medal for Museum and Library Service. The National Medal is the nation's highest honor for museums and libraries that make extraordinary civic, educational, economic, environmental, and social contributions. What do you think these honors tell you about the work you are doing?
I tell people I'm just an ordinary person trying to do extraordinary things.
Ah,
That's how I
I
look at
love that.
myself. I'm not out there for accolades. I'm just a regular person, and I'm just trying to be very outspoken
Yeah.
because I tell people when you see injustice, speak
Mm,
up. I think a lot of movements die, a lot of movements are not started because of silence and complacency. And I always come from a place of love. No matter how difficult the things I might say, the intention is not to harm. My
mm,
intention is to bring out the facts and to
yeah.
see that there are people out there who are hurting. We can't look at human beings as commodity. We have to look at them as human beings.
Yeah.
And so the awards and stuff, they're nice, but I'm just trying to do the work that I guess has been instilled in me to do as a human being on this earth.
Yeah. Now, you started a new career. Farming really is a second career for you. Tell us about your first career and why you decided to do this and not just get a condominium in Florida.
Yes. So I was a physical therapist for 37 and a half years.
Wow.
I loved my job. And I learned a lot from being a physical therapist as it relates to farming because as a physical therapist, it's
Mm,
about helping to restore function to people who are
mm,
injured. So I'm helping to restore, healthy soil and healthy plants to a system that has been exploitative and extractive and trying to you know help grow plants.
yeah, yeah. I read your goal was to pass the torch to a new generation. Have you achieved this aim? Are you still working on it? Where are we with this goal?
Yeah, the goal is working very well, and I say that because I'm 68 years of age. I've started so many things. I've started helped start farm school, Black Urban Grower Bugs, the Bugs
Mm,
Conference, um, Black Farmer Fund, New York
mm,
State Black Farmers. So many things I have started, farmers markets. And so I now look at the young people
mm.
that are before me and I'm passing that torch
Nice. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful place to be spiritually, to live in that truth, right?
to live in that truth, to let people understand that I stand on the shoulders of
Mm,
my forefathers and foremothers that came before me.
yeah.
And someone had to make that long journey
Mm,
across the transatlantic
hmm.
divide for me to be here, to
Yeah,
me
yeah.
to live my dream. And so
Mm,
I hats off to my ancestors for making that journey, and for me to stand here is a testimony,
yeah.
of their strength and their humility.
You have a second career, and you give a lot of public talks. You've been quite successful at both careers, it seems. You give a lot of public talks. What do you think people don't understand about, or don't necessarily get right about the work you are doing, and what you are trying to achieve?
A lot of people have never seen a black woman farmer. Hello.
Mm,
so,
yeah, yeah.
so I think, to go on stage and talk about me being a black woman and farming in the 21st century is sort of an eye opener for so many people. And
Yeah.
then also for me to give up my career as a physical therapist and to go into a second career and delve into farming. People are curious and
Mhm,
amazed.
mhm.
And then also to talk about the positive of growing food and how it gives me strength and the spirituality, the connection to nature, and to understand my place in agriculture and to recognize, my culture, my African American culture, and how my ancestors were brought here with seeds in their hair and they planted the food that this country is eating, and the cuisine, the food, the cuisine, the tools, the methods. My people brought that here. And so I
Mm.
want to uplift that as well as the indigenous people that were here and took care of this land. So I'm honored, I'm just so
Yeah.
honored that I can do the work that I'm doing now.
Tell us about Rise and Root Farm.
Hmm. Rise and Root Farm. I'm going to just show a little picture of it. Here we are. Here it is, Rise and Root Farm. For those
Nice.
that can
How many
see.
acres is that? How many acres is your property?
So we're part of the Chester Agricultural Center, which has 120 acres. We have 6 farms on the Chester Agricultural Center. We have 5.5 acres, of which we have 1.5 acres are in production.
Mm,
We started, again, I tell people, you have a dream, put it out to the universe. We
mm,
started our journey in 2014. That's when I retired from physical therapy, went up and down Hudson Valley looking for land and just couldn't find it. Met someone, told that person about my dream, and that person gave me a phone number. I called that number, and it landed us here on this farm. And so I tell people time and time again, you got a dream.
mm.
Don't hold that dream inside.
Yeah,
Spread it out to the universe because someone is going to hear it and
yeah.
someone is going to make your dreams come true. So That's why we're here, Rising Root Farm. Four of us, three of us are LGBTQ women, two of us are women of color, and we grow food to feed people body, mind, and spirit. Our connection is still with the city. We are rooted in food justice, and I'm having the time of my life.
I can see that. What should activism and advocacy look like in this era?
Uh, Speak up and speak out. I
Mm,
tell people, when you see injustice, speak up and
yeah,
speak out.
yeah.
That's the new revolution. Get involved.
Karen Washington, farmer, community activist, and founder of Rise and Root Farm. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thanks for having me.
And that's it for our program today. Remember, you can follow me and the show on Instagram or Twitter. Thank you so much for watching Feminism Today on Free Speech TV. Join us again next week. Karen, you're a
Thank you.
superstar. I'm going to have to come to your farm. Where's your